We all know the FNaF lore is really strange, but did you know that most of it couldn't have actually happened if it weren't for one character? Maybe you didn't, or maybe you just didn't really think about it, and that's the character we will be talking about for today's theory. We will be talking about everything this character does and why they are single-handedly the most unknown important character in the entire series. Yes, today we will be talking about the underrated FNaF character who is responsible for most of the story. This is a video my buddy Shadow Libra will be really excited about because we will be talking about why in the FNaF timeline there would be nothing without Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy first appeared as an Easter egg in FNaF 2 on some occasions when no one was in parts and service, but then he went on to appear again in two separate parts of FNaF 3, in the Follow Me minigames and as an Easter egg. And both of these things are actually really important to the story as a whole, but I want to start from the beginning of the timeline, when Shadow Freddy makes his first chronological appearance. But in order to solve the placements in the timeline where Shadow Freddy is, we have to figure out who Shadow Freddy is, and FNaF 4 coupled with Ultimate Custom Night can help us do just that. In the files of FNaF 4, it is actually confirmed that Nightmare is Shadow Freddy, which is something else interesting that we'll get to later. But in Ultimate Custom Night, one of Nightmare's voice lines is, "I am your wickedness, made of flesh." Since we play as William Afton in Ultimate Custom Night, this means that Shadow Freddy is basically a figure of William's evil, a being created from his anger, and therefore in some regards representing William himself. So that brings us to Shadow Freddy's first chronological appearance in the FNaF timeline. Midnight Motorist. In Midnight Motorist, we 100% play as William Afton, considering Orange Guy is coming later the same night that Charlie died, and drives the same purple car just like William drives in Take Cake from FNaF 2. We also see a kid on the couch watching TV just like Mike does in this location and wearing a gray shirt like he wears in the FNaF 4 minigames. So Orange Guy is clearly William, but his kid was kidnapped by an animatronic out the window? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you consider things that we see in other places in the series that parallel Midnight Motorist. One thing that has always stuck out to me about the footprints in Midnight Motorist is that there's only one set of them, and there's no footprints leading up to the window. It's as if whoever this is just appeared out of thin air. And if we fast forward to just recently, You're the Band actually supports this idea that Shadow Freddy is the animatronic outside the window. Sylvia goes to check on Timmy to see if he was woken up by the sound of a bunch of dogs barking non-stop, but she finds that he's not in his room and his window is open. In Midnight Motorist, William says that the bite victim had run off to that place again, and we can safely conclude that that would have been Freddy's or possibly Fredbear's. When Sylvia goes outside, she finds Timmy being led away by a shadow, and it just so happens that the shadow leads him to Freddy's. And finally, we have Toy Chica the high school years. I've already talked about this in a lot of my previous videos, so I'll just try to touch on it briefly here. In the FNaF World Update 2 map, we see 6 gravestones next to William Afton, implying that they're kids he directly killed. But there's a 7th grave off and away from the rest, implying he didn't kill this one. We know from Toy Chica the high school years that William did indeed have 7 victims, but in FNaF World it is heavily implied that the 7th victim wasn't killed directly by him, but by the cause of his actions. And in Toy Chica the high school years, there's one death prompt that parallels Midnight Motorist, where Toy Chica says,
"I told him to come over later. That should be enough. And if he doesn't show up, I'll just go to his house. And if he doesn't open the door, I'll just find a window."
And since the bite victim doesn't die in this scene, and that William is angry to find his son gone, it seems that the most likely culprit of luring the bite victim away was the representation of William's evil himself, Shadow Freddy. And Shadow Freddy here really sets all the events of the whole series into motion. Without him, the entirety of FNaF 4 would have ended differently. Consider the fact that FNaF 6 is meant to tie up loose ends, and that in FNaF 4 the bite victim is said to have seen something. Many people believe that to be the missing children incident, but there's a problem with that. As I talked about in my You're the Band video, the missing children were all killed separately, and their bodies were never grouped together. And the bite victim doesn't even have access to witness the missing children incident, because guests are not allowed in the safe room. And as strange as William Afton's goals are in the series, he's not an idiot. Do you really think he just left the safe room door unlocked or open? No. No, he didn't. So the only way the bite victim could have witnessed the missing children incident is under BV5th, if the bite victim was a part of the missing children incident. And even then, he still technically didn't witness everything, because there would have been no dead kids around. And the question in FNaF 4 was, don't you remember what you saw, not don't you remember what happened to you. So what did the bite victim see? Well, if FNAF 6 is to tie up loose ends and the bite victim is afraid of Fredbear, maybe he's afraid of Shadow Freddy because Shadow Freddy lured him out of his window, all the way to Freddy's or Fredbear's to witness William killing Charlotte, only for William to return home and find the bite victim not there later that night. And he says that the bite victim will be sorry when he comes back, implying that this is when he's locked in his room, setting into motion the events of the FNAF 4 minigames. Without Shadow Freddy, not only would he have not been locked in his room, possibly changing the events of FNAF 4, but he also wouldn't be scared of the animatronics, so Mike wouldn't have stuffed him into Fredbear's mouth to try and scare him, meaning the bite of 83 never would have happened and the entire course of the FNAF timeline would be completely different. But that's not the only time Shadow Freddy caused the events of FNAF. No, without him, we would have no sister location, FNAF 3, FNAF 6, Ultimate Custom Night, FNAF VR, AR, Security Breach, and everything that's coming after. Nothing would happen if it weren't for Shadow Freddy's role in the Follow Me minigames from FNAF 3. In FNAF 6, in the Insanity ending, Henry talks about how Follow Me is when William collects the remnant that is injected into the fun times. He discusses the events of Follow Me and says that William lured the spirits back to a familiar place with familiar tricks and brought them all together, and that he questions if they're still aware after he brought them together.
He lured them all back to a familiar place, back with familiar tricks. He brought them all together. Are they still aware? I hope not. It keeps me awake at night.
The familiar place is the safe room, since that's where the kids were lured to when they were killed, and it's with familiar tricks because Shadow Freddy, the being that represents William himself, lured the kids back to the safe room again. Henry also says that Shadow Freddy was a trap that William set in place to get the remnant. Without Shadow Freddy, William wouldn't have gotten the remnant, or at the very least, he would have gotten it a different way, which could have had rippling effects, possibly resulting in William not becoming Springtrap. Who knows? But either way, it would have been different. And if Sister Location had happened then, the events would be completely different. And there wouldn't be an Ennard, and even if there was, Mike would now be dead, and the events of FNAF 4, 3, and 6 would never have happened. FNAF 6 not being created means William wouldn't have been transferred into FNAF VR, and Glitch Trap wouldn't exist. Not to even mention that FNAF VR might not even happen either. And that means no FNAF AR either, which might be for the best, but it doesn't look so good for the rest of the timeline either. And of course, there wouldn't be Security Breach or anything that comes after. But there's another thing that Shadow Freddy does that is really important to the storyline. FNAF 4. As I talked about it in a video from a couple months ago, FNAF 4 is torture that the bite victim inflicted on Mike, putting him through the same nightmarish experiences that William inflicted onto the bite victim prior to the events of the FNAF 4 minigames. But with Nightmare being Shadow Freddy, it's clear that he has some sort of role here. Based on Step Closer, I believe that the bite victim set a curse on Mike, which he did using Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy is like the enforcer of the curse, similar to how Foxy was in Step Closer, since in both situations, they appear in their nightmares as well as just random places they go. In Step Closer, Pete sees Foxy at a pirate-themed mirror maze, and in FNAF 3 we see that Shadow Freddy is following Mike wherever he goes, including to the left of the office as an Easter egg. Nightmare is partially responsible for the FNAF 4 nightmares, and as Chuck says in Step Closer, the only way to break the curse is to return to the place it originated from. In Pete's case, it was Freddy's. In Michael's case, it was Fredbear's Family Diner. The FNAF 4 nightmares encourage Michael to go to FNAF 3, which he goes to first. And when he does, the bite victim forgives him, because it shows him that Mike really does still care. But although the bite victim forgives him, Shadow Freddy continues to pursue him, because the curse has not yet been broken. Mike needs to go back to Fredbear's Family Diner, and he does. As I've said many times in my videos, it's very likely that the FNAF 6 location is the same building as Fredbear's Family Diner, just repurposed. But I'm going to talk about all the reasons why in another video. But basically, pretty much the entire FNAF lore would have gone differently if it weren't for the existence of Shadow Freddy. And it's kind of sad that not many people actually realize it, because Shadow Freddy is kind of always overshadowed, pun intended, by Shadow Bonnie. But anyways guys, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, then please do leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys!